When I first started to think about how to introduce video to the new Range Rover, I immediately wanted to say things like iconic. It's the automotive equivalent of Hampton Court. It's a British icon, a success story, and all of those other tweedy motoring journalist cliches. And you know what? That's not to say that they're not true, because they absolutely are. But here we are on the Range Rover launch. You'll have to forgive the noise in the background. It's all a bit busy. We're about to head out. What I want to know is this a very modern Range Rover? Because let's face it, it's 2022. Our energy needs are changing, the roads are changing, our transport needs are changing. So Land Rover has got a massive job with this car, and it's worth mentioning also it's going to be sold in 170 countries. So, you know, it really is a global product as well. We'll be heading out from the hotel here in Gloucester for a drive on some really lovely roads up through the Wye Valley, and then off-roading up at Eastnor, which is about 80 miles away. So we have just driven through Tetbury, which is very close to Prince Charles's place. It all seems very appropriate, doesn't it? Because obviously Range Rovers always have that association with the royals. In fact, we had a briefing last night where the head of PR mentioned that the Queen had arrived at her Platinum Jubilee stuff in the new Range Rover, which they're very proud about. The car itself definitely has that kind of association, and it feels, it's just that sort of, you know, aristocratic thing about the Range Rover, isn't it? It's a very intangible essence of the Range Rover, and I think one of the things that defines it, in fact I think the thing that defines it more than anything, is this driving position, because we haven't done that many miles yet. You can already get a good sense of what the car's like, but it's weird how the second I got into the car I adopted the elbow on the windowsill, kind of, you know, very casual. You've got a nice armrest here, and this is it. This is what the Range Rover is all about. I cannot think of another car, and I include the Bentley Bentayga, even the Rolls-Royce Cullinan has this exact driving position. This, I think, might be the best off-road luxury driving position in the world. In fact, I think it is. That's the thing I love most about the Range Rover. Before I've even talked about the engine, the standard adaptive air suspension, standard all-wheel steer, all of the bells and whistles that this car comes with, it's the driving position. Land Rover call it the command driving position, but it's just fabulous. I mean, the visibility out of this car is wonderful, because you've got that big, high, boxy glass house all around you, and you get in. It's just, you just instantly relax. You adopt the Range Rover driving position and you de-stress. I mean, it's virtually like a yoga position, isn't it, this driving position? It's got that sort of zen quality to it. And do you know what? The rest of the car, that sort of sums it up. It's very, very zen. Everything is, cameraman Andy just now mentioned that it was all just so, and it's exactly right. Everything about this car, from the material quality to the way it steers, to the refinement, is just so, just because it can be, and that's what you expect it to be with a Range Rover. Even though this is the D350, which is, I mean, it's the more powerful of the 3 inline 6 mild hybrid diesels that you can get, the Ingenium diesels with Range Rover. I think you can tell that it's diesel, but only just. I mean, it's such a kind of distant kind of background murmur. It's very lovely. I think probably the standard mild hybrid diesel, it is the biggest seller at the moment. Obviously the car's only been available to order for a few months really, and they're seeing that the D350 is proving to be one of the biggest sellers, and I can see why, to be honest. So you can get, I mean, the Range Rover starts from under £85,000 for the base diesel. This car here is an HSE, and so that's fairly top spec, and it's got, you know, optional panoramic roof and 22-inch wheels, and it is, as an aside, I'd mentioned it's on all-weather Pirelli tyres. And after options and various bits and pieces, so it comes to £125,000, which is, I suspect by design, pretty much the standard transaction price that they're seeing for the Range Rover in the UK. That's what people are spending. The 2022 Range Rover is available with 355 brake horsepower or 394 brake horsepower 6-cylinder petrol engines, a BMW sourced 523 brake horsepower V8, plus 3 diesels with either 247, 296 or 345 brake horsepower apiece. There are also 2 petrol plug-in hybrids that offer an official electric-only range of 70 miles. And Land Rover says that they will do a real-world range of 50 miles in any conditions. On top of that, there's a standard or long wheelbase Range Rover, with the latter now offered with a spacious 7-seat layout. And it is a phenomenally heavy car, I'm going to say that. Despite the modernity of all the materials and the manufacturing process, all the aluminium sort of aspects of this car, it's still a 2.5 tonne car. And if you go for the plug-in hybrid that's coming later in 2022, if you go for one of those, you're looking at very nearly a 3-tonne car. It's 2.8 tonnes officially. So weighs a lot, but it doesn't really sort of feel heavy when you drive it. I think the steering is key to that. It's really lovely weight and sort of silky build of weight as you go into a corner. It's just absolutely lovely. I really, really like it. Have I said lovely enough? I think I probably have, but it just keeps coming to mind. There's something, again, about the Range Rover. You get in and it instantly feels like your living room, doesn't it? There's something very familiar about it. And I think Land Rover have absolutely hit the nail on the head with that. They absolutely have done the right thing by not making this a complete revolution. It has to be evolutionary because the Range Rover is such a loved car. In the standard auto mode, steering weight is just absolutely exactly what you want it to be all the time. So if you're on a bit of a faster country road, builds really nicely, you feel like you've got a good sense of what's going on with the car, and its corners surprisingly flat as well. So fully adaptive air suspension as standard. 4-wheel steer I think is a really key thing. Some 4-wheel steer systems can make cars feel a bit nervous actually, but this doesn't at all. It just makes it feel a bit more kind of responsive, particularly at low speeds. I think is where the 4-wheel steer really comes in. This thing's got a turning circle of under 12 metres, which is more like what you'd expect from a family hatchback, not from an enormous barge of a 4-wheel drive car like this. The ride comfort, really, really lovely. I do have one niggle about that. So there's a particular road surface that you get a slightly peculiar patter from the suspension on this car. I mean, it's got 22-inch wheels on this car, and it's almost like there's a slight lateral movement from the suspension because it's got so much weight to manage, and that feels a little bit odd. So I don't think the ride comfort is 100% faultless. I think there's an aspect of that, perhaps slightly smaller wheels would suit. So I will say that. And apart from that, I mean, it's just really spot on for what you want. The design of the Range Rover is what executives describe as an absence of vulgarity. They very much believe that less is more when it comes to design, and so, while this is clearly an evolution, it's all the little details like the flush door handles, the way that the area where the window and body meet has been smoothed over, the hidden wipers. It's countless small efforts to make the Range Rover look kind of like it's been poured into a mould rather than built in a factory. It looks really modern and sophisticated, yet is unmistakably a Range Rover, and that, surely, is what we all want. As for practicality, there is masses of space in the rear seats, which get their own air conditioning and are also cushy and cosseting even in the standard car's 3-bench configuration, while the long wheelbase will genuinely seat 7 adults in comfort, even if the rearmost passengers might need to be quite dexterous to get in and out. The boot gets the trademark split tailgate, and you can even add an optional tailgate event feature, not to mention a fancy boot floor that can be divided to stop your items from rolling around, or can even function as a backrest when you're sat on the tailgate. Even in the standard car, the boot is very spacious, and let's face it, it's going to be big enough to take the Labrador, and on the occasion probably the wicker hampers and the Barber jackets as well. I've noticed that, this is a virtually peerless motorway car. Really steady, really, it's a directional stability thing. So it's one of the things that are most notable about really good motorway cars that don't make you feel tired after a long journey, is that you get really steady responses on the motorway. So you're not putting tiny incremental steering inputs in all the time to kind of keep it on the straight and narrow. The Range Rover seems almost kind of laser guided down the lane. It's really, really good. But I do have a bit of a gripe with the refinement peculiarly. So, I mean, yes, it's really quiet and fabulous in here, but there is a bit more wind noise than I would have expected. So this car's got the optional panoramic roof, and I wonder if that's part of it, because it sounds like a lot of it's coming from the A-pillar over the windscreen. It's just a bit more flutter than you'd expect. It's quite, when you've not got any music on or anything, you do notice it. I think it's just inevitable with quite an upright car, isn't it? It's just aerodynamics. It's a brick-shaped car going into the wind, but that is one thing I would say, is that there are more refined cars out there, arguably even, I'd say, still more refined SUVs. Regardless, like I said, with the stability of this thing, the driving position again coming into it to make it feel so kind of chilled and comfortable, it is just absolutely phenomenal as a long distance car. Still really, really good. Obviously, luxury goes hand in hand with tech these days, and Land Rover haven't been idle about that either. So this touchscreen, standard, naturally, you get all the features that you expect, your nav, your phone integration, you know, all of that stuff, and this new haptic screen, so it's kind of, which makes it a bit easier to understand when you've definitely hit the icon properly, because you feel the screen sort of clicks just to tell you that it's active. It works really well. I think the graphics are really fabulous. It responds pretty quickly. I think sometimes I still feel like I would prefer a rotary dial when I'm driving. I still think that's a slightly easier way of controlling an infotainment system when you're driving. But nonetheless, because the screen's really big, and actually because it's you know, it's a pretty standard, straightforward menu layout, so you can go to your home and you get your, you know, bits and pieces here, then that's all pretty straightforward. I do really like it. It's all just beautifully finished and appointed, and also extremely high tech. I think they've managed to blend that sort of tech stuff with also feeling quite not analog, but nonetheless not overly tech. It's not in your face in the same way that it can be in some other cars. Right, we've stopped for the obligatory coffee and pastries. Cinnamon roll for the win, by the way. And now we are heading to the off-road course at Eastnor, which is sort of something of Land Rover's, kind of the home of Land Rover, really. So we're going to do a bit of an off-road course around here. I'm not going to lie, we've got a Defender in front of us that we're following. So I'm going to follow them, and we're going to head around this course and see how the Range Rover does. We're already in...
Feel free to utilise the off-road camera as we negotiate some of these types of tracks.
As you heard the nice man say, we've got our camera on, which is good because it gives you an angle, a vertical angle down the side of the car on both sides, so you can see if there might be stones jutting out and this kind of thing. We're now in mud rut mode. We're in low ratio on the 8-speed. It's a ZF gearbox on the road, really smooth, absolutely no quibbles with it at all on the road. Out here in low ratio, well, I mean, you know, to state the bleeding obvious, every Range Rover is four-wheel drive. You get the Terrain 2 response, so you can choose what setting you want. This new 5th generation Range Rover has got that all-wheel steering that I've already mentioned. I think in practice for most people the benefits are going to show mostly in manoeuvring around car parks, but it's got great benefits in off-roading as well. And actually in mud rut, that's the only mode in the Range Rover where if you stop, the car will maintain the angle on those rear wheels. So I think it can hold an angle of about 7 degrees on the rear wheels. So you get quite a tight turning circle, and it can really help in certain difficult conditions out off-road. There's something about taking somebody else's £125,000 car down a path with, you know, tree roots and enormous things jutting out, and, you know, there's just potential panel damage all over the place, really, isn't there? Anyway, here we are. At least it's on a Land Rover event. I'm sure we'll be fine. And I have one thing: the head-up display. When you're in this mode, it even shows you on the head-up display the descent angle and various other kind of off-road information as well. It's really clever. Not to mention you can get all of that stuff on this screen as well, including your wading depth and all sorts of stuff. 22-inch wheels. What could go wrong? Oh, it's quite slippy, she said in an obvious fashion on the off-road course. It's funny because I have to say, because you're in low ratio mode on the gearbox, it does feel like the engine's sort of... It doesn't feel like it's strained, but you can hear that it's sort of working a bit, and you get a bit of a thump from the gearbox. But I mean, the sheer ability of this thing to... I mean, it's really sort of slick, wet clay mud that we're going up at the moment. And it's just absolutely... It's clawing its way up, no issue at all. We're just sort of bumping along. I mean, you know... it's it's hard not to think that, although we haven't done anything really dramatic yet on the four-wheel drive course, it's definitely living up to the reputation for being a consummate off-roader, you know, world-class off-roader, as well as being a luxury vehicle. It's not even going to disturb your oat latte in here, is it? That's the thing. They must go into launches like this just with a kind of budget for replacing alloys and panels on this course.
Just to my left, there's a route coming off this tree, so we're paid just to drive slightly off centre to the right as you pass this to where we are now. And then a little bit further up is where we've got this hairpin where you'll find the all-wheel steer will hopefully allow you to make it in one go, and we need to put a manoeuvre in with the Defender because it's quite a tight turn.
Yeah, understood, thank you. So, just for some reference, the Defender, probably the best off-roader in the world, has just gone around this corner and had to reverse and do another to get around the corner because it's quite a tight turn. In the Range Rover, with this all-wheel steer, we've got a bit of a dip down there, we're going to make it in one go.
Yeah, perfect. And you took a much wider line than us there actually, and still managed to make that turn in one go. We turned in slightly earlier and just had to put a manoeuvre in so you can really see the benefit of the all-wheel steer for this sort of environment, certainly for what we're doing now.
As the man said, you can really see the benefit of the all-wheel steer. So you can see all your off-road information, it's showing you what your wheels are doing, and it's also giving you your wading depth, I think, or the sort of angle that the car's taking. It's all very clever. And then you've got your camera over here, which shows you right down the side of the car. It's really, really clever stuff, and you've still got your basics there. And then you've got your, like, this is crazy, look at this. Isn't that clever? So cool. Yeah, really clever stuff. Little... It just cleaned the camera. That's so cool. Love it.
So Vicky, we're just coming up to the section on our right where I'll probably jump out and marshal you. It's a little bit tricky in terms of making sure we've got the car positioned quite accurately. So I'll jump out in a second and just guide you through this section.
I would add that I don't think it's standard with the Range Rover that you get a nice man called Richard, who's an off-roading expert, to flag you round all of the more difficult corners. But here we are, nonetheless, being given the special treatment. I would add that you do, having said that, get a Range Rover Experience Day if you buy a Range Rover. So you can come and do this. If you buy a Range Rover, you can come and have a go. Or go around the factory, which is quite cool. So I think we're going to turn the Range Rover into a tripod now, which is fun. Right, here we go. We're going to do a crazy... I think I'm going to be sick. Oh! Oh my goodness! You can feel the ABS system, or the sort of torque. Right. Oh my word. This is really quite scary. And I think I've got two wheels in touch with the ground at the moment. Turning this. Okay. Wow. I'm quite glad I got through that without hearing some awful grinding, you know, oh. Wow, that was quite anxious, but very cool, I must say. I think for the average Range Rover owner, that's going to be more than they're ever going to do. And yet, I have to say again, this thing barely felt like it broke a sweat. That's just me having nervous sort of panic attacks. Blimey, it's pretty amazing. So while we're trundling along here with views of Hay Bluff and Hay on Wye sort of spreading out to the right, I want to talk about towing, which is going to be a major thing, of course, for a lot of Range Rover owners. So 3.5 tonnes, so you can't quibble with that, can you? That's going to be as good as pretty much anything else out there, including some of the pickups that a lot of people use to tow with. And, you know, it means that it's going to tick all of the boxes if you are going to be lugging horses or caravans or any of that stuff around, really. Race cars, I'm sure. all of that kind of thing, it's going to do that absolutely brilliantly. And again, with the all-wheel steer that we've already mentioned, that's going to be really useful for helping with manoeuvring around if you've got a trailer attached as well. So there you have it, the most iconic off-roader reinvented for 2022. Is it modern enough? Yeah, absolutely, it's modern enough. It's just absolutely sumptuous and delightful. I do really, really love it. It's not flawless. I do think there are some slight quibbles with the ride and even the wind noise at motorway speeds. So there are some things that maybe could be improved, but for all that, the Range Rover is a spectacular thing, and I think that Land Rover's done a fantastic job with it. My only gripe at this point really is that they haven't launched a pure electric version. That's coming in 2024. I sincerely hope that Land Rover is right when it says that it will be worth the wait. I think they've probably got some tricks up their sleeve with that one. It is just a joy, the Range Rover, and I think it's a fantastic evolution of such a well-known and much-loved model, so they've done a really good job with it. Don't forget to head to cargurus.co.uk for a whole host of fantastic used cars. And while we've got you, like the video, subscribe to the CarGurus UK YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any of our videos.